Our next guest is known for his ability to leave people speechless when debating tough topics, including abortion. Take a look.
Planned Parenthood is supposed to prevent abortions.
Because, Planned Parenthood doesn't prevent abortions. They perform hundreds of thousands of abortions a year. They perform 300,000 abortions a year. They're the leading abortion mill in the United States.
Evidence for that, though.
That they perform 300,000 abortions a year from Planned Parenthood. That's my evidence.
Ben Shapiro is editor-in-chief of The Daily Wire and host of the political online podcast, The Ben Shapiro Show. He joins us now from Los Angeles, California. Ben, thanks for being with us.
Sure, thanks so much.
Ben, you give a lot of speeches, often on college campuses, and it seems you get questions about abortion quite often. Is there a reoccurring theme you've noticed with these questions on these different campuses?
Well, I think that the theme that I get the most is young women who suggest that I am somehow invading their bodily autonomy if I am pro-life, that if I want to preserve the life of the unborn, that this is somehow a threat to their rights as an independent woman. And I don't think it's a particularly strong argument, particularly because most of the people who state it generally don't bother to acknowledge the other side of the argument. They fail to acknowledge that there is a child in there, that there is something apart from a polyp. And once they are made aware of this, then their argument sort of falls apart. So they have to ignore part of the argument in order to make their argument stand up. And when I expose that, it doesn't tend to work too well.
The rights of the unborn. I want to address the New York Times op-ed about you that ran last week. Some have called it a hit piece. And in it, writer Jane Coaston says you have hollow bravery, calls your campus speeches shadow boxing, and if you wanted to be genuinely brave, you challenge, quote, some of the wrong-headed ideas held by your right-wing fans. How do you respond to that? And do you see all the students you meet as coastal elites who have never left their bubble, as she calls them?
No, and I think there are a number of ways to respond to that. Number one, I've never really attributed bravery to myself. I don't think that it's brave to walk on a campus and talk to kids. I think it's brave to be a member of the military. I think it's brave to be a cop. I think it's brave to be a firefighter. I don't think it's brave for me to walk with a security team at my side onto a stage. If I thought that I was going to get shot and murdered, then I probably wouldn't do it. So I don't consider myself part of that group anyway. As far as the idea that I'm not doing any good, one of the reasons that you have these debates is the same reason that Socrates had debates with random people on the street. I mean, the purpose is to elucidate ideas and bring ideas to the forefront. Some of these students are offended and easily offended, and some of them are melted as snowflakes. But the truth is, I've debated people on the left side of the spectrum my entire career, including very prominent people. I mean, Cenk Uygur, Sally Kohn, the head of the Seattle NAACP. I mean, I debate people on the left on a routine basis who are not college students, and going on college campuses is a great way for me to speak to students who, number one, feel they've been abandoned if they're on the right, and number two, students on the left who've never heard this point of view at all otherwise. So it was a very weird piece, and I was sort of put back by it, especially because of the claim that I don't say anything that sometimes is uncomfortable with my own listeners, considering that I spent the last 2 years not really openly supporting President Trump. In fact, I didn't vote for him during the election cycle. My listeners, by and large, did. So I've been pretty critical of people who are supposedly on my side when I think that they're wrong. So it's just a very weird piece altogether.
Ben, you are a graduate of Harvard Law School. You were the youngest nationally syndicated columnist in the U.S. You're a smart man. What convinced you ultimately to become pro-life yourself? So
it really began with science for me. So I'm a religious Jew. Religious Jews are pro-life. So from a biblical standpoint, the support for the pro-life position is pretty strong, but it really is science that I find to be the best argument and the most convincing argument. And as you see 3D and 4D ultrasounds, as you see the development of a child in the womb, as you realize that every argument against the pro-life position is based on false premises that could be applied to fully grown adults, then you begin to see that either the line is drawn with conception or isn't drawn at all, and that tends to be the way the argument goes.
Ben, because you're known for your ability to answer tough questions, we thought we'd do a quick rapid-fire Q&A with you on common abortion claims our viewers might face. How does that sound?
Sure, sounds good.
All right, claim one. Abortion is only 3% of Planned Parenthood's business, and they do a lot of good for women. Your response?
Yeah, so number one, that's not true. As far as 3% of their business, supposedly the idea is that 3% of all services provided by Planned Parenthood are abortions. But they include in those services things like handing out condoms, things like regular screenings. The fact is that of the actual operations performed by Planned Parenthood, something like 95% of all of those operations are done by Planned Parenthood, and Planned Parenthood provides 300,000 to 400,000 abortions a year. So it all depends on the metric that you're using, but to suggest that Planned Parenthood is not in the abortion business is simply false.
Claim 2, a fetus in the first trimester doesn't have moral value.
Again, if you want to make the claim that a fetus doesn't have moral value in the first trimester, you'd have to explain when a human being develops moral value. Is it with a heartbeat? Because there are plenty of people who are living off a pacemaker. Is it with lung function? Because there are plenty of people who are on iron lungs. Is it with brain function? Because you're asleep, right, sometimes, and when you're a newborn baby, your brain function is not particularly high. So when exactly do you draw this line? And if you draw the line anywhere other than conception, you have to explain why it doesn't apply to people who you would consider a normal human being who shouldn't be killed.
Finally, claim 3, and this is a common one. It doesn't matter what you believe about abortion. You don't have the right to impose your pro-life views on another woman's body. How do you respond to that?
Now, that's just as foolish as arguing that it's none of my business whether you beat a dog in your backyard. It's not my dog. I don't have anything to do with your backyard. If you decide that the dog is worthy of beating, what's to stop you from doing it? Am I the great moral arbiter? The answer is we make these moral judgments all the time when we see a violation of moral law, and it is a violation of moral law to kill another human being, which is why we have murder laws.
Ben Shapiro, editor-in-chief of the Daily Wire, thank you for your time.
Thanks so much.